Hey guys, it's Takasta here again. Welcome to another video review. So today I'll be reviewing the Steelseries Sensei wireless gaming mouse. I believe this is one of their first wireless options from Steelseries. It takes up the Sensei form factor, but they really just turned into a wireless option. So in general, this mouse is quite expensive. They priced at $160 US, which is pretty insane in my opinion. I bought it here for 1,300 Hong Kong dollars. So mainly I'll be comparing this mouse to other wireless options from like Razer, for example, Logitech, and whether or not like the build quality, Razer, the performance really is worth the $160 price tag. Now on to the general specifications. Well, like I said, this does follow the original Sensei that I have here. I'll be doing some comparisons right here. It does use the Avgo 8200 CPI DPI sensor. Uses 30 million Steelseries switches, 1 millisecond polling rate. Apparently, it's rated for 20 hours of rechargeable battery life. It has 8 programmable buttons, like the original Sensei, and also well, you could use a braided USB cord, and also has the 16.8 million color programming that is found in the original Sensei as well. Moving on to the weight and the shape of the mouse. So the first thing when I'll just take this away. First thing I noticed when I'm using this mouse is it is relatively light. It does weigh in 114 grams is my own measurement. Official specs say 120 grams. In terms of weight, like for a wireless mouse, it's extremely light. It's actually very similar to the original Sensei. If I show you here in terms of the weight, the original Sensei weighed in 104 grams. This is 115 grams. Just to give you a comparison of other wireless mice, the Mama is 138 grams. The G700 is 155 grams. Orbos 148 grams. The Gigabyte Avia Uranium is 180 grams. So that's really comparison. Because if this is a wireless option, the fact that usually is because it's so light is actually quite nice. The fact that there is no cord and the fact that it's still quite light really makes it for a very comfortable gaming option, I believe. For the shape, it does maintain the same form factor as the original Sensei. So basically, if you like the original Sensei, you'd probably find this very comfortable. Although there are some differences in terms of the shape or how you would grip it. In terms of the specs, it's 41 millimeters by 69 millimeters by 129 millimeters. So in terms of shape, maybe I'll talk a little bit about what the changes in the grip are. Even though supposedly the shape is the same, but then because on the Sensei wireless they have this like 3-piece coating, different coating. They have like a glossy surface, a matte surface, and a matte surface on the top. So it makes you grip the mouse a little bit up front rather than the old Sensei. The old Sensei is like a one piece, if you can see right here, and so you can actually grip the mouse quite far back or quite far front. The Sensei wireless, you're actually kind of forced to grip the mouse during in this area of the matte surface. So if you like gripping the Sensei very far back, you might not be able to do it with the Sensei wireless. So that's quite, I guess, unfortunate. So moving on to build quality. So when you're paying $160 US, I expect they come with some better build quality. You know, like when you pay for money's worth for Logitech, for example, they give you really high quality products. For Steelseries, I feel like the build quality is lacking a little bit, especially when you're paying such a high price. Notably, for example, the surface, it does employ the same surface as the rival. So if you didn't like the surface for the rival, you probably wouldn't like the surface of the Sensei wireless as well. How I would describe it, it's kind of like a blackboard. It's very smooth, but it's not really nice on the skin. However, like this is my personal feeling. Some people might like if you like the rival, you would like this, but I didn't really like the rival surface, so I'm not really a big fan of this as well. In terms of the side grip here, they really changed the grip. With the Sensei, it's actually like very grippy. It's when you put your hand on it and you just have a little bit of sweat, it just kind of sticks. This one is relatively more slippery in terms of the side grip. And like I described before, it does use like a 3-piece system on the side. So you have this matte surface here, glossy surface, then the matte surface. So for this surface, you can kind of grip, when you lightly touch it, you can kind of grip it, but it does kind of slip. It's not exactly like the original Sensei, where it's like extremely grippy. For the rest of the mouse, it just doesn't feel as solid as I would expect in a $160 US dollar mouse. From the scroll wheel, in fact, it does use the same exact scroll wheel as the rival as well. I'll talk a little bit about the scroll wheel. It is quite hard to go through each of the dents, I guess. You have to use a little bit of force, and it's just really not as comfortable. Like I much prefer like the Logitech kind of scroll wheels. Next, moving on to the charging dock, which is the main wireless function or feature of this mouse. So the charging dock is quite, the only thing I would say is very high build quality. It is extremely heavy. It weighs in at 290 grams, and it has like an anti-slip grip, I guess. When you put it on the table, you can just like put your mouse on it, and then the dock itself would not move, which is a really, really good function. So the fact that it's rated at 20 hours of battery life, I think that's quite accurate. I'm not quite sure, I haven't tested it exactly, but I've been gaming for maybe like 2-3 days, and I haven't had to charge it, and I just like put it back on. So there are battery saving functions on the mouse that you can use, which change light settings, change to whatever. But then whenever you don't need it, whenever you go to sleep, you can just like put your mouse onto the charging dock, and it works actually quite nice. So in terms of the charging dock, I would say it's probably the highest piece of material or the thing in this entire package. However, I think the material should really go into the Steelseries wireless rather than the dock itself. That's my personal opinion. More on the charging dock, it's actually kind of cool. You can plug the USB cable, which doubles as the cable for the mouse and the charging dock. And then when you see there's a lighting here, which is actually kind of cool. So when you put it on, it starts charging. When you take it off, it stops charging, obviously. But then when the light actually can reflect the battery status. So when it does have battery, it goes green. And when it goes below maybe 25%, it turns yellow. And then when it's out of battery, the light can actually turn red. So that's actually kind of a cool feature, I think, which is quite good for the Steelseries Sensei wireless, I guess. But again, the dock is not the main thing. It's actually the mouse. Moving on to the switches of the mouse, this includes the build quality. They do use their 30 million Steelseries proprietary switches that were found in their Steelseries, the rival mouse. Personally, I think compared to the Omrons, I might do some click. If you can see here, the Sensei, it uses the Omron switches. And it's quite crisp, it's quite light. It does take a little bit to actuate, although with this like kind of chromish surface, it does feel very, very nice. So the Steelseries clicks were one of my favorite clicks in the game. However, with the new Steelseries, the proprietary switches, the buttons that I described in my rival video, they feel quite a bit mushier, and it's actually not as, it's still actually quite comfortable. I would say it's very, very different. It doesn't actuate, it's not as light of a click, but then it's a much mushier, but then the click has a much less travel distance. So although it takes a relatively similar amount of force to press down, however, it travels very short and it comes back, rebounds quite quickly. So I'm okay with this switches, nothing much to complain about these. But in terms of the SteelSeries proprietary switches, I guess they're gonna roll out these switches with all their new mice as well. Moving on to the lighting, it does use 16.8 million color settings, so they've been implementing this on all their mice for a long time now. So this is but then it kind of looks like the rival implementation. So you look at the Sensei, if you remember the lighting, I thought it just looked awesome off the Sensei kind of like logo. However, the new wireless Sensei, it doesn't glow as nicely. I think it glows like the rival, so that's just a personal opinion. Moving on to the firmware. So along with the rival and the 9H, the Sensei wireless also uses the SteelSeries Engine 3. I mean, this is a pretty sophisticated firmware. You can set the standard firmware anywhere from 50 to 8,200 save DPI, saveable on 2 CPI settings. So you can just like press this to change the CPI settings. It also has like settings for color switching, polling rate, angle snapping, lift off distance control, acceleration, deceleration. So everything you liked, if you did like the SteelSeries Engine 2 or the SteelSeries Engine 3, you'll find in this mouse as well. So that's quite nice. All the buttons are programmable as well. I've never been a fan of programmable buttons, but there you go. So everything you need out of the firmware is really in here as well. One little feature as well, I would say, is that you can also program the lighting to reflect the battery status, which is kind of cool. So you can program the dock, and in fact, like I said before, to reflect the battery status, or you can program the mouse itself to reflect battery status. Inside the thing, it also has a lot of options for battery saving, so you can set whether or not, like for example, when you use the sensor, this will basically turn off. It's like a battery saving mode. You can make the mouse go to sleep after, let's say, 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 5 minutes. So in terms of battery saving options, I think it's all there. Like, though I don't really like the build quality for a wireless mouse, it does have a lot of cool wireless like functions, I guess. Now onto the sensor performance. So the Sensei wireless, again, like I said before, it does use the Algo 9800 laser sensor. If you weren't a fan of the laser sensor performance on the Sensei Raw, for example, you're not going to be a fan of this. On the Sensei and the Sensei Raw, it did use the Algo 9500. Only in the Sensei MLG did it use the 9800. So this is kind of an extension of the Sensei MLG version. In terms of the wireless option, a lot of people don't like wireless gaming because it does add an inherent lag. I can attest to that. In terms of its polling rate, it's extremely not stable. Like at Oddly enough, at 1000 Hz, that's like its most stable. I can post some polling rate pictures here. It's the most stable option. But then when you go down to 500 Hz, 250 Hz, 125 Hz, it actually jitters, actually fluctuates quite a bit, because like the wireless mouse does have to communicate with the dock in terms of sending its signal. So you can't really expect it to be that stable as well. In wireless mode, the polling rate, I mean, the tracking is also, there's a fair deal of smoothing as well. So you can, if you were prone to input lag before, you'd probably feel more input lag in this than the Sensei actually. Personally, I don't really care too much about the input lag. It's not really been a big deal or deal breaker for me. But if you did feel the input lag before this, you would definitely feel the input lag in this mouse as well. In terms of when you're making small movements with the mouse though, there's sometimes, maybe because of the wireless functionality, I guess, and maybe like it stops tracking, or kind of like there is a little bit, there's not jitter, but then sometimes there's like a couple of skipped pixels sometimes, and sometimes, like for example on this surface, it would just like stop tracking for a bit and then go again. So in terms of tracking, the wireless tracking, I mean, in general it's okay, but then sometimes if you want the good response of an a wired mouse, you really should not be going for this option. I think if you were okay with the Sensei performance as well before, this would be a good option for you. In terms of, obviously, here's some pictures. In terms of the maximum tracking speed, it does track at 3 meters per second, 4 meters per second, so there's going to be no problem with that. However, it is a laser sensor. It does have its inherent acceleration. So in conclusion, after about half a week of uses, I think I've gotten used to Sensei wireless mouse. So if you always like the Sensei form factor, the Kano form factor, this would really be up your alley. Although, especially because it's so lightweighted and it's wireless, it does really add to the comfort of the mouse. However, $160 US, I think it does lack the build quality that I really expected from this mouse, even though the dock is really high build quality. The overall general rival kind of feel and look to this mouse really turns you off. If you didn't like the Avgo 9800 laser sense performance before, you're not going to like this. The polling rate is not as stable, and also there seems to be a lot of drag, a lot of smoothing is implemented into this mouse. So I guess, like, in conclusion, like, unless you really need or really want a sensor ambidextrous form factor wireless mouse for non-intense gaming, you should get this mouse. Otherwise, I would probably not recommend it. It's just really not worth the price point. There are a lot better options if you want wireless gaming, even though maybe not at this form factor or not from Steelseries maybe. So I hope you guys liked that video review. I hope that wasn't too long. I'm probably going to be selling this out. I'm not going to be using it for too long. Even though I do like the form factor, the Sensei option is the tracking really just doesn't help my gaming all that much. So hope you guys like that video review, and stay tuned for my G502 mouse review. So thanks guys.